Bonjour! Welcome everyone to the Passé Composé Bootcamp. So we are going to run through all the Passé Composé rules in one short video. Won't that be fun? Okay, so we are going to start from the very beginning. So to do Passé Composé, you need two parts. Okay, so this is something to remember. So we'll start with the easiest to remember. Okay, so you need two parts. And the easiest, right, or the most common type of passé composé that you'll see are verbs that need avoir as the helping verb. Okay, so helping verb is the first part right here, and that is a verb that you will conjugate. And then the second part that you have to worry about is something that they call the participe passé, so the past participle. Okay, so I usually just abbreviate this as the PP. Okay, so you need a past participle. You need two parts to form the passé composé. So let's start with some of these regular verbs that take avoir in the passé composé. So first we have parler à mes amis. So to speak to my friends. So if you want to say I spoke to my friends, what you have to do first is put in je, right? Because we're talking about ourselves, so I. And then you conjugate it for avoir. So then you do j'ai, all right? So we've taken care of the first part, and now we have to worry about the second part, the past participle. So for regular verbs that end in er, like parler, you just take away the er and you add an e with an accent. So don't forget this accent, everybody, okay? It's really important because otherwise you're not dealing with your participle correctly, and then you may not pronounce it correctly. So it is kind of important to include that. So you put it all together, j'ai parlé, boop, okay, à mes amis. All right, so I spoke to my friends. Okay. All right, so another kind of verb that you might come across is a regular IR verb like choisir. Okay, choisir, enfin. So again, we start the same way. We start with our helping verb, j'ai. And then to deal with a regular IR verb, all you have to do is cross out the IR and add an I. Okay, so then it becomes j'ai choisi un film sur I'm out of room. So sur Netflix. Okay, so I chose a film on Netflix. Okay, and that's how you do a regular IR verb. Last example of a regular verb that you might come across is an RE, okay, like rendre visite à mes parents, so to visit my parents. So again, you start the same way with je, okay, and then you're conjugated avoir, so j'ai, and then here you just cross out RE and you add a U, okay, so j'ai rendu visite à mes parents. Out of room again. Okay, so I visited my parents. Okay, so this is how you deal with regular verbs in the passé composé that take avoir. All right, so now, unfortunately, in French, there are an awful lot of irregular verbs. And so these are ones that will just have some really strange past participles. And honestly, there's no pattern. You just kind of have to learn them by heart. And eventually, as you build up, you'll be able to identify families and things that look similar. But to start with, I would really recommend mastering irregular verbs that you are most likely to use. So these are examples that I see a lot from students. Boire du café, lire un roman, faire de l'exercice. Okay, so if you want to say I drank some coffee, again, you start with je, okay, and these are all verbs that take avoir, so we do just like we did before. And now, right, with boire, it's just really bizarre past participle, j'ai bu du café. So I drank some coffee. So you see this participle is just really strange, and it's just different. And so you have to learn that it looks like that. Same thing with lire. You start with the same way, j'ai, okay, and the past participle of lire, again, very strange. J'ai lu un roman. I read a novel, okay. So again, this is very strange, but if you look at it, it kind of looks like bus. So this is a case where sometimes you can put participles into little families, and that helps you remember what they look like. So last example is a verb that we see like all the time, literally all the time, faire. So you need faire to do a lot of expressions. Something to keep in mind though, sometimes people fall into the trap of putting faire down for everything, and you don't always need it, you just need it with certain expressions. So here we have faire de l'exercice, so working out, doing some exercise or exercising. So again, to deal with that, if you want to say I worked out, you just start the same way, j'ai. Okay, and the past participle of faire is with a T. Okay, j'ai fait de l'exercice. Okay, so again, very strange past participle, and there are just a lot of them. So my recommendation is, again, to just pick out ones that you are most likely to use to talk about what you did in the past and go from there. So we just saw a lot of examples of verbs that take avoir as the helping verb, and that will be most verbs that you come across, but there are also these special verbs, these van der Tramp verbs. You might have learned van der Tramp as the mnemonic device to remember them. Some people used the house of être, right, la maison d'être, to learn about these verbs. But basically these are intransitive verbs. They're action verbs that will not take a direct object. And because they are that way, they will use être, okay, as their helping verb. So these are, again, our exceptions. I put down three of the most popular ones. So aller, so to go to the university. So if you want to say, I went to the university, again, you have to start with je, okay? But instead of using avoir, so j'ai, we now need to use être and conjugate être for je, which is, of course, je suis. Oh, come on. Je suis, all right, and luckily, at least the participle is regular, so you can just do this. À l'université. Oh, running out of room here. Oh, that's okay. Okay, université, so I went to the university. Now, something that is special about only être verbs, so only these van der Tramp verbs, is that they have to agree in number and gender with the subject. So this is our subject, je, right? So now if I'm talking about myself, I identify as a female subject, okay? So if I'm talking about myself, I went to the university, I have to make this participle agree with je, okay? So because it's feminine, we have to add an E, okay? So we only have to worry about that if we have a verb that uses être. If you have, a friendly avoir verb, you don't have to worry about this agreement. There are, of course, some exceptions, but that's advanced grammar, and we don't have to worry about that right now. It's just, you just really need to make this agree. Okay, so second example, we have sortir. Sortir is a house of être, van der Tramp verb. So again, you start the same way, and then you conjugate for être, so je suis. And then sortir has a regular participle, thank goodness, so we can just do this. Avec mes amis. So I went out with my friends. Okay? Right? And again, you have to think about making this agree if this is a feminine subject. All right, last example, rentrer chez moi. I went home. Je suis. Okay, rentrer, thank goodness, a regular participle. Okay, so we can just do this with the accent. Je suis rentré chez moi. I went home. Okay, so again, if this is feminine, then you have to worry about making this agree, but you only have to worry about those agreement rules if you are using être as an auxiliary verb. Okay, and the last segment of our Passé composé bootcamp has to do with pronominal verbs. Now, when I say pronominal verbs, I just mean that there are some verbs and some expressions in French that use these little pronouns. Okay, and when you look them up in the dictionary, they'll almost always be listed as ce. And these are just verbs and expressions that for whatever reason in French, they need those pronouns, okay? So sometimes that might be reflexive, okay? So se lever, okay, to get up at 7 o'clock. That is what they call a reflexive verb. And all of these verbs that use a pronoun, they fall into the house of être. So you will need to use être for them. And then, of course, because you use être, you have to worry about those pesky little agreement rules. Okay, so if you want to say, I got up at 7 o'clock, okay, you start in the same way with je, and then you have to conjugate être, okay, for je. So you do this. All right. And then something else you have to think about for pronominal verbs is that ce needs to change in function of the subject. Okay. So here we have a first person singular. So then it becomes je. Je me suis levé. And levé, thank goodness, that's a regular participle. Okay. So you do this. À 7 heures. So I got up at 7. Je me suis levé à 7 heures. Okay. And again, you have to realize, if that happens to be a feminine subject, then you have to think about making your participle agree. Okay, so je me suis levé à 7 heures. All right, so we have our subject. Okay, we have our pronoun that's been changed. We have our helping verb, and then we have our participle. Okay, next example, se promener, to go on a walk. So this is one that's just like really idiomatic. For whatever reason, French likes to put this pronoun here. C'est la vie. So we start with je again, all right, and then we have to change our pronoun in function of our subject. So je me. Then we conjugate our helping verb, je me suis. Then you deal with your participle. Thank goodness, another regular participle. Je me suis promené. So I went on a walk. Okay. So something to think about with pronouns. Sometimes when you start working with them, you want to throw them down for everything, but you don't always need a pronoun. Okay. So you really don't always need a pronoun. And something else to be aware of is that sometimes there are synonyms or similar expressions that will not use the pronoun. So you just want to kind of like take note of which verbs, which expressions use the pronouns, so that you avoid just throwing them around all over the place. Okay, so yeah, so again, if this happens to be a feminine subject, then we got to think about making this agreement work. Okay, and final example, s'amuser. This is another really idiomatic expression. It means to have fun. So if you want to say I had fun, you start with je. All right, then you change the pronoun again, je me, and then you put in, or you conjugate your helping verb, right? So je me suis amusé. All right, and this is a regular participle, thank goodness, and we just put our accent in. All right, and again, if this happens to be a feminine subject, then you got to think about making that agreement. Okay, so again, the agreements you only need to use if you have these être verbs. If you have the good old avoir verbs, you don't have to worry about it so much. Again, there's complicated grammar for which there are exceptions, but don't worry about that right now. Just remember that these are kind of the basics of passé composé, and this is how you're going to go about talking about what you did last weekend or last week.